Well, this is long overdue, but better late than never. In this video, I want to share my round 9 game from the Battle of the Sexes tournament in Gibraltar. I played Grandmaster Zhansaya Abdumalik from Kazakhstan, and we had a really crazy tactical battle. It was a cool opening, a kind of rare opening that I've never played before, and then middle game was insane. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what happened in this game. So before we jump into it, I do want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is no one, unfortunately. But I do want to let you guys know that I have two other active YouTube channels, which maybe some people don't know about. I have a Eric Rosen extra channel, which I've been posting full streams to. When I stream on Twitch, not every Twitch stream makes it to my main channel, but I'm posting 3 new streams per week to this channel. And I also have a clips channel. So if you have a shorter attention span, you can watch some shorter form content. So with that out of the way, let's get into this game. And Zhansaya played pawn e4. And this is actually my third time encountering e4 in the Gibraltar tournament. First round, I played a Fromsky, Marcel, who also played e4, went into a bishop b5 check Sicilian. And then I played Muzichuk, who went into this position, Maria Muzichuk, but after I played knight f6, she played bishop e5. So I didn't have a mainline open Sicilian until this game. I played the move knight f6, and it's a somewhat offbeat move. I explained this in the Muzichuk video, which you can watch. I'll try and link it somewhere, maybe down below. But the point is to provoke knight c3, which Zhansaya did play in this game, and then I take on d4. So we did get into a mainline open Sicilian position, and from here I played g6, going into a dragon. And I will say I've never played a dragon before in my life in a serious tournament game. So this was a little bit new for me, but I spent a good amount of time before the tournament preparing some interesting lines. And what we're going to see is I don't enter a traditional dragon in the sense that I deviate from main theory pretty as early as move 7. In this position, the main move by far is castling kingside for black, but I play the third most popular move, which is pawn a6. And we can call this a Dragondorf, or some people say dragdorf, where I'm combining ideas in the dragon and the Najdorf. Najdorf is another very common variation of Sicilian, where black plays an early a6 to stay flexible. And one of the reasons for playing this move is I delay castling, and after white plays most common move queen d2, I play another kind of funky looking move. I commit to not castling kingside, but rather play pawn to h5. And this move just looks really random if you've never seen this before. But the point is it's prophylactic. I'm preventing the bishop from coming to h6. I'm also accidentally enabling caps lock because I'm still getting used to this keyboard. But white can no longer go for this kind of common middle game idea to trade off my dragon bishop. Because I control h6 square, it's a bit harder for white to attack. I'm also preventing white from expanding quickly with pawn g4. And this move is one of the top suggestions from Lila Chess, which is, of course, one of the newer, stronger chess engines that's based off a neural network, has a more kind of human style approach. And I think even Stockfish has h5 as one of the top moves, like within the top 3 moves. So it's definitely not as popular as the main lines, but it is becoming more trendy. And Magnus Carlsen actually played this as black not too long ago against Grishuk. They played a game in 2020 that also had this position. Now, in that game, Grishuk played bishop c4, but in this game, Zhansaya castled queenside. And after castling queenside, it guarantees the game is going to get sharp pretty quickly. I continue here, pawn b5, king b1, bishop b7, so completing development, and she plays pawn h4. And during the game, I'm pretty sure pawn h4 was a surprise for me. I was more prepared for a line like bishop e2, and I had a hard time understanding the purpose of pawn h4. But maybe it was just an attempt to prevent me from playing h4. Maybe it's to secure control over the g5 square. It's a move that's playable, doesn't really change too much in the position. And I do want to mention one alternative that actually, after I played bishop to b7, I was thinking could be a potentially funny line that I'm curious if she had considered during the game. But it turns out white could play the move pawn e5 here, which is actually a very forcing move. I would have to take the pawn. And then there's a really funny move, knight to e6, which just looks ridiculous on the surface, but this is playable because I can't take the knight right away due to queen takes t8, and then I would have to say, oh no, my queen. But after queen takes d2, white has an intermediate move, knight takes g7 check, king would have to move to f8, and then white has another kind of in-between move, still delaying recapturing the queen, knight e6 check. And this would force me to accept triple pawns. But after rook takes d2, this position is actually really playable for black. I had calculated this a little bit while it was her move, where it was still possible we could go into this. And I'd seen the move knight d5. And even though it looks like the pawns are weak, black does have some nice pressure in the center, and it's hard for white to actually exploit the triple e-pawns in the center. And on top of that, black is up a pawn, so I wouldn't be too concerned with entering this position. So going back, we did not enter the funny line. She plays h4, and the next few moves were just improving moves for both of us. Knight d7, a3, discouraging b4. I play queen c7, bishop e2, rook b8, and then she plays rook c1. So we were both kind of just staying within our own territory, reorganizing some of our furniture. And what she did was she basically shifted her king and rook over to one square, so it actually looks like she castled illegally. But from white's perspective, maybe it was worth doing this because the king is a little bit safer, just tucked away. And with the rook on c1, she does have some long-term pressure against my queen. And as we're going to see, one of white's plans is to move the knight away from c3, knight a2, and then potentially go for the idea of pawn c4 to open the c-file and target my queen. So kind of a long-term move. Now, the move I played here was also trying to use some x-ray vision in the position. Given my rook is aligned with white's king, I played the move bishop to a8, just clearing the path, maybe intending to play b4 next move, but she very promptly prevented this with knight a2. And now it's clear that white does have some ideas of c4, maybe also combined with knight b4. And I realized after this move that I have a really thematic central break that usually when the knight is on c3, the move that I want to play just isn't possible, that being pawn d5. But here pawn d5 looked really nice, and I went ahead and played it just because it is well supported, and e4 is less supported from white, so now I have three attackers against e4 pawn. And if white takes the pawn on d5, I would happily recapture, pressuring the bishop, unleashing my other fianchettoed bishop on the king side. So I have the double fianchetto, and this would be a very, very pleasant position to play for black. So rather than capturing on d5, she played the move knight to b4, which is a counterattack. And now not only does the knight pressure the d5 pawn, but she makes a strong threat of knight takes a6, which I do have to kind of deal with because this would be a fork. So I played the move queen d6, which defends the pawn laterally along the 6th rank, but also reinforces d5. So this is a nice kind of multi-purpose centralizing move. And then she played knight to b3. So the tension is mounting, and now the queen for white is also pressuring along the d-file, and white is looking to control some of the weaker dark squares on my queen side. And here I went ahead and finally castle. I figured that it is very much worth getting my rook into the game, and I wasn't too concerned about bishop h6 ideas here, given that the main focus is in the center. So she went ahead, played rook to d1, and then I played knight to b6, so aiming to get my knight into c4, where it would pressure a lot of juicy targets in white's position. And when I played this move, it actually looks like this is a blunder at first, because white has a cool tactical idea, which almost works, but then I have an even cooler tactical idea. It looks like white can play the move pawn e5 with the fork, and after I take the pawn, then there's a skewer, bishop to f4. It turns out in this position, black has a really, really incredible move. And if you don't see it right away, feel free to pause the video and try and find it, because it is really satisfying if you can find this move on your own. But the move is not moving the queen, but rather knight to e4, which just works out beautifully for black, because it's a counterattack against white's queen, but it's also a mate in one threat. And black is just getting the upper hand after whatever white plays here. If bishop takes queen, I would take with check and then recapture with my bishop on e5, and black has the advantage with just better center and being up a pawn temporarily. So she took a think after I played knight b6, and I think it was pretty clear that she had seen this line. If white doesn't see the prospect of knight e4, then e5 does look very attractive. But she went for a different aggressive idea, bishop to c5. And here we see a different type of skewer along a different diagonal, where my pieces are a little bit shish kebabbed from the bishop. And here my queen just has to find a square to move to. And I realized that it's not so easy to find a reasonable square for the queen. The move I wanted to play was queen e5, just to get the same tactical ideas against white's queen side. But I didn't see what to do against the move queen g5. And white just has some really annoying initiative, and my tactics are just a little bit too slow here. I was fantasizing about the line queen takes b2, king takes b2, knight takes e4, but sadly, black is just going to be worse at the end of this after, let's say, king a2, or maybe even bishop d4 is simpler. And after I regain the queen, I'm just down a piece in the end. So this would not work out. So instead of moving to e5, where the queen is a bit more exploitable, I chose a more exotic destination for my queen and played the move queen h2, which on the surface looks a little bit wild, but I do target both pawns, and I'm pretty sure this is what the position called for. Now, it turns out that white has a really nice way of securing an advantage here, which he did not find during the game. But if you turn on the engine here, Stockfish will say white's winning after the move rook to h1. And I was a little bit worried about this during the game, because then the queen has to find a new square, and I can't take on g2 because then the queen gets trapped. So I'd probably end up playing a move like queen g3, but then white can kind of cash in on the queen side, and black is the one suffering here. Thankfully, this didn't happen, and she took on a6 immediately, and this allowed me a nice counterattack with knight to c4, hitting the queen, leaving my rook attacked on b8. And I should point out here that if she takes, I would happily take back. And there's some really tricky lines, like if she takes on b8, I can take back with rook, and even though I'm temporarily down the exchange, there's some really nice pressure against both the knight and the b2 pawn. And after a move like knight d4, which looks like it does kind of defend everything, I could retreat to c7, and there's definitely some nagging initiative for black. So rather than taking on c4, she played the move queen to e1, and the game continues from here. Rook bc8, saving the rook. She played queen g1, and I didn't want a queen trade. I wanted to keep my queen as an attacking piece. Threatening mate in 1, provoking bishop d4, then queen a6, hitting the knight, and after knight to b4, things finally begin to liquidate a little bit in the center after takes and takes. And I was feeling good at this point, given that my queen survived, even though I'm aligned with the rook on the d file. There's no great discoveries for white, and my pieces are beginning to find some really nice coordination, just with the knight support on c4, the bishop really nicely aligned with the king, and white's pieces just a little bit misplaced, I would say. And she played the move pawn to g4 here, which is an attempt to try and just burst open the king side. But it turns out g4 was a very big error. And my next move was one of my proudest moves of the game, because it was basically a sneaky double attack. And the move uses just kind of the whole board and some really nice geometry. I'm debating whether to tell people to pause the video and try and find the move for black. If you're up for a challenge, feel free to do so. But the move I play is queen to e6. And the reason why this is a double attack, it looks like it's just a single attack. Of course, I am threatening the pawn on g4 now 3 times. But I have an even stronger threat with this move. I'm aligning myself with the knight on b3, which is not defended because this pawn is pinned on c2. So it turns out my threat in this position is to take on a3 and then take on b3. So for example, if I plays a move like g5, I can take, and then black is just having all the fun here. Bishop b2, knight saves itself, unleashes the bishop, and white is probably just getting mated very soon because knight c3 is also just a massive threat. And this is usually what happens when your pieces just all are directed towards the opponent's king. Tactics just work out very beautifully for black. So when I played queen e6, white's in a bit of a pickle, and what she ended up having to do was trade off the bishop for the knight on c4. And I was happy with this transformation because I'm keeping my light square bishop, so light squares going forward are more likely to be in black's control. And after knight c5, I was more than happy to just chuck my rook, take the knight, sacking the exchange, but after knight takes g4, I have a ton of compensation for the exchange. I do have a pawn for it, but I also have just the beautiful bishops, a really, really safe king, also a 4-on-1 majority on the king side. During the game, I had a good feeling black was better, and Stockfish does support this assessment. It's saying that black is close to winning, gives minus 2.4 here. But as we're going to see, the position is still really crazy, and it's not so easy to convert. And I was also getting somewhat low on time, just because the middle game was so complicated. Every move I was probably averaging like 4 or 5 minutes at least. So time trouble was approaching, and the game goes on. She played king to a2. I play rook a8, improving my worst place piece, now aligning with the king. She played bishop to b6, which, how to describe this move? I think she played bishop b6 because there's some idea of rook d8, just to force a rook trade. So I went ahead and played bishop to h6, hitting the rook on c1, not quite trapping the rook, but forcing it to move to just an even sadder square. And now the c2 pawn looks very juicy, even though the knight is defending it. I went ahead and played pawn c3 check, unleashing the queen, forcing pawn to b3, and then the next move felt really, really good. Bishop d2, creating a really solid formation of the pawn defending the bishop, bishop defending the pawn, and now the rook is just completely cut off from the entire open file. And the c2 pawn is looking really delicious given that I have ideas of queen f5. But she kept fighting, and she played the move bishop to c5. And the move I really wanted to play here was queen f5, just creating the battery. But after rook to f1, my queen can't maintain itself on the diagonal. I'd have to retreat. So instead, I went after a weak pawn in the position with the move queen f6, targeting the h-pawn. And she still played rook f1. I snagged the pawn. And then she played queen d4. And here we're on move 36. And this is where I was getting really low on time. We were playing with a time control that on move 40, we would each get extra half hour. But in this situation, I was already below, I want to say below 3 minutes. And I began to freak out a little bit, given that my bishop is attacked. And the move that I saw and I wanted to play was knight e3, but I couldn't fully make sense of it during the game. And I was actually scared of the move rook h1, which just leads to complete insanity given that my bishop could take it, but my bishop is pinned to my queen, and my queen is tied down to defend the bishop. Now, the engine will say black's completely winning here, but it's really far from simple. The only winning move is queen f4, and then white has a really crazy line, rook takes h5. And I'm not sure if I spotted this in the game, but I would have had to calculate this really precisely if I wanted to go into it, because after g takes h5, there's a funny line, rook g1 check. Black's really close to getting mated here. If this or this, white has mate in one. My only response is to block with a knight, and then white has a really cool move, knight d5, hitting the queen, again taking advantage of the pin of my bishop, also hitting the e7 pawn. Best move for black is to take, and after queen takes d5, there's a fork, and I would have had to find a really clutch rook lift in this position, starting with the move rook a6, and after queen takes h5, removing the guard of the knight, attacking the knight twice, only winning move for black, rook g6. So this would have been really difficult to calculate from so many moves back, and especially given that I only had like a couple minutes to do so, I played what I thought was a safer option, pawn f5. But unfortunately, when I played this move, it does leave my king a little bit more naked on the g8 square, given that all my kingside pawns pretty much have been advanced. And I was told after the game that Lawrence Trent was going absolutely bananas when he saw me play this move.
Eric Rosen, for the boys, can he do it? Quick, what is this move?
F5?
What is this? What is this move? The guy is on a suicide mission.
Yeah. I have no words to describe this move.
He's not a chess player. He's a kamikaze pilot.
Well, this is just too risky. Look at that king on g8. What is f5?
Young children watching, maybe close your eyes for the next few moves or for the rest of the game. So after pawn f5, she played queen c4 check, and then I completely freaked out. I had seen this move coming, and I thought that I can just slide over, and then there's no more checks. The problem is that when I play king f8, I'm aligning with a rook, and I just walk into a pin. Now the f-pawn is pinned. There's nothing defending the bishop. She takes the bishop, and I was sad.
Queen e4.
Queen
Game
e4,
over.
game over.
Game over. Blunder. He just blundered the piece.
Awful.
Oh,
Eric.
oh no. The bishop on e4.
Oh, Eric.
I have to say it. I just can't help it.
But I kept fighting. I didn't resign. I played the move rook to a5. She played queen d4. Now this is my 39th move. I just have 2 more moves to make until getting an extra half hour, and I blunder yet again. Although the position is already lost, but I made a really just fatal error here. Played the move queen f6, and she cashes in even more. Queen d8, hitting my king, hitting my rook, and then I was even more sad. But I didn't resign because I was also a little bit tilted. Played king f7, she took, And then I played on for 10 more moves, despite being down a grand total of 2 rooks for 2 pawns. I thought maybe there's still some hope, like if this was bullet or maybe ultra bullet, there'd be some hope of just pushing all the pawns towards promotion. So I'll just zoom through the next several moves and we'll see how this game finishes. Queen e5, queen a7, queen e4. Not really attacking anything because everything is defended in white's position. She plays queen d7, and after I make one last attempt to push some pawns, she just simplifies, rook takes d2. Very stable move. And I do get the pawn to the second rank, but after queen d5, we trade queens. I play e5, then she plays a4. After king e6, pawn c4, it's very clear that white's passed pawn, just the a pawn really, it's going to be more effective than my 4 connected pass pawns, and I resigned in this position. So it was really interesting game, really painful game, given that I just kind of threw away my advantage in the span of a couple moves, with first playing f5 and then playing this dreadful king to f8. It turns out black is still better here if I play the move king to g7 and then hide the king on h6. There's still a 1.5 advantage for black, according to Sockfish, in this position. But I think it was a very instructive game, and kind of goes to show what I need to work on if I want to win games like this. I have to manage my time better. I have to just see tactics more clearly, especially in very crazy and complicated positions. And I really have to just watch out for opponent's simple threats and simple tactical ideas. Sometimes it can be easy to look for tactics for yourself, but it's so important to also be aware of the opponent's ideas to just minimize blunders. So I really hope that those watching got some value out of this game. Maybe I can inspire some people to play this tricky line of the Dragondorf Sicilian. And if you have any feedback, let me know in the comments. And I have one more recap to do from the Gibraltar Battle of the Sexes. So stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe. Check out my other YouTube channels. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.